When you have ME-CFS or a closely related illness, it's not just about the cardinal symptoms of exercise intolerance and post-exertional malaise, for the very mechanisms that create those issues also create systemic problems throughout the body, including in the brain, and in ways which can actually have an effect on the very essence of what makes us human, our social nature. In this video, I'm going to be sharing 3 ways in which this illness has affected my ability to relate to others and my social relationships, including brain fog during conversations, difficulties with emotional affect, and derealisation. But first, my name is Patrick Usher, and I am author of the book Understanding ME-CFS and Strategies for Healing, in which I break down some of the latest, most exciting ME-CFS and long COVID research which can really demystify these illnesses, and in which I share the various treatment strategies that I have tried in order to improve my quality of life. The links for that book are down below. So as I say, ME-CFS is not just about the issues with exercise intolerance. It also creates a profoundly different physiological affect throughout the body. That is to say, that it changes the kinds of thoughts and feelings you have because your physiology has become different and more dysfunctional. To put this in the most basic way, because ME-CFS involves a reduction in blood perfusion throughout the body, and therefore in the brain starts to struggle and to work less well. Now, of course, this is obvious when it comes to things like cognitive issues and various tasks that you might need to do, but it also impacts how we relate socially to others, because the kinds of thoughts and feelings that we have will also change as a result of the reduced blood perfusion. It's very important to remember this point, and I often have to remind myself of it, because I find that you can get upset that your personality is not what it used to be. I would ask you, if you are also an ME-CFS or long COVID patient, do you feel that your former personality has actually diminished or even gone away since you became ill? So let me now talk about the 3 problems that I mentioned more specifically. The first is the brain fog in social situations. Now, my brain fog can be very intense, and if I'm in a social situation, this means that I'm struggling to think of what to say, what questions to ask. I'm struggling to follow the thread of the conversation. There's often times when people make jokes and I don't understand what the joke is, because it maybe comes at something from left field, and that involves a certain leap in cognitive capacity. I often struggle to follow more complex conversations, and within all of this, which is the baseline, I also find that after 45 minutes or an hour, these problems can become worse, and at that point I might become a silent participant in the conversation, assuming that there's more than one person that I'm talking to. And this makes conversations very difficult, and I often fear that I don't come across as I would want to come across because I am just struggling to understand what's actually happening. Nevertheless, I do value social situations, and within reason I try to participate, but it is a big struggle, and I don't feel like my natural self is able to take part, and that for me the whole thing feels a bit forced. Now, this relates to the second problem, which is my emotional affect. So not the physiological affect, although it's related, but more the emotional affect. And this is literally just how you respond emotionally to other people and conversations. And what I have found is that my emotional affect is flat, and I find it difficult to be spontaneous emotionally. So if someone has made a joke, it's hard for me just to laugh. In fact, very difficult, because I cannot produce that. Whereas when I was well, I could laugh spontaneously. The same goes for other emotions of any kind, really. Anger, even sadness, even the ability to cry. I have found that since I became unwell, I cannot actually, or I can only very rarely cry, and it's not the same as before I became ill. When I was still well, I could cry spontaneously, and it could be, a lot of tears. These days I struggle to produce tears, and this is probably because of problems to do with the flow of fluids in the body, in ME, and also because I have anti-muscarinic 3 autoantibodies, which actually reside in the tissues of the body that produce moisture and shut them down. So I also have difficulties with sweating and mucus and saliva. So I've kind of dried up since I've become ill. It's one of my most unpleasant symptoms. And as a result of that, I cannot cry. So there's a lack of spontaneous emotional response when I am relating to other people. And this is upsetting for me. I'm not sure to what extent they notice this, because what I choose to do is to respond, to create a response deliberately that I know is how I would respond if my natural self were working. And so I kind of, as it were, fabricate what I believe is the right and appropriate response to what the person is saying. In other words, it's a kind of mask. But it's the best that I can do, given that my brain is just not working as it used to because of the illness. So basically, you could say I'm faking it until I make it, except there's no making it. The making it would come if I actually recovered, and then these responses would return to normal. And what I have found is that in the periods where I am feeling in better health, both of these last issues, the brain fog in conversations and the affect, improve dramatically, and I start to be able to relate to people more like my old self. But then I crash again, and other problems come back. And finally, the third issue that I have had in this area is profound derealisation. This is when you feel like the world does not exist. So I might be walking around the centre of town or centre of a village. The world does not feel real, and this is a very unsettling situation to be in. And I often have to really tell myself to kind of try and get with it. For example, let's say I'm in the centre of town and I see someone I know and I'm going to have to talk to them. I have to say, get with it, Patrick, because I'm in this situation where everything is just kind of weird, and suddenly I have to engage socially. And that's very difficult because everything feels unreal, and then you're suddenly having to engage in a way that is real. Similarly, if I'm crossing the road in that state, I have to really, really try very hard to make sure that I'm looking out for traffic, because even though the cars don't feel real, they are, and you'll know about it if you get hit by one. So derealisation also is a real issue, and I think probably it fits into the intense brain fog, that when that reaches a certain level, the world starts to seem unreal. But those are the three issues that I wanted to talk about today, because the things like the reactions to physical activity can be so debilitating and severe. It's easy to forget about the other ways that this illness can impact you, and in a way, these issues are less important than being stapled to the couch, unable to move. But over time, I have found that these issues can really wear me down, and they make me upset because I can't relate in the ways that I want to be able to relate, and that I used to be able to relate before I became sick. In other words, I kind of feel like the Patrick that I know that I am is sort of hibernating, and hopefully at some point will return. But in the meantime, I have to make a lot of extra efforts in order to relate to people as I would wish to, and I know that I fall short of that goal as well. So that's it for this video. In the next video, I'm going to expand on this theme a little bit, talking about other ways in which the illness affects me. But I'll be interested to hear, do these relate to you? I'm sure that they probably do. Do you have other problems that come up in social situations? Please leave your experience down in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.